This is part 2 of Technology Week 1, Sign Numbers, and we'll cover multiplication and division on this slide. Now, when you're multiplying, you're going to do regular multiplication with the quantities, but you're going to have to be careful of the signs. If you're multiplying two numbers of the same sign, then you're going to get a positive result. So whether you multiply two positive numbers together, you're going to get a positive result. If you multiply two negative numbers, you're still going to get a positive result. If you multiply two quantities of different signs, then you're going to get a negative result. A lot of people remember if you multiply two like signs together, you're going to get a positive. If you multiply two different signs, you're going to get a negative. So let's look at some of these examples. Here I'm multiplying a negative by a positive, which means my answer is going to be negative. And then I just multiply 3 times 4, which is 24. And this one, I'm multiplying a negative number times a negative number, which means my answer is going to be positive. Multiply the quantities. 5 times 2 is 10. And of course, that's just going to be written regular old 10. Here I've got 0 times negative 50. Well, anytime you multiply anything by 0, it's just going to be 0. And then here we have 10 times negative 5. It's a positive times a negative, so the answer is going to be negative. 10 times 5 is 50. Now, when you look at these are using exponents. Remember, exponents is just a shorthand way of using multiplication. There's a difference when you have one with a parenthesis and one without a parenthesis. The parenthesis is used to indicate that the minus sign is included in the squaring. In other words, this one, you are squaring 8. You are not squaring the negative, so it would be evaluated as a minus sign and then 8 times 8. Well, 8 times 8 is 64, and you would bring down the minus sign, so this would result in a negative 64. This one, they're telling you they want you to square negative 8, so it would be evaluated as negative 8 times negative 8, and a negative times a negative makes a positive. 8 times 8 makes positive 64. Let's try it with a different exponent. This is raised to the fourth power. Notice this one has a parenthesis, so this would be negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. Negative 2 multiplied by itself 4 times. Just do them 2 by 2. Negative 2 times negative 2 would be a positive 4, and I'll just copy down the rest. 4 times negative 2 would give me a negative result. 4 times 2 is 8. Copy down what's left. Now I have a negative times a negative, which is a positive, and 8 times 2 is 16. Now you might see a rule here that some people remember. Pairs of positives or pairs of negatives make a positive, and if you look here, there are 4 negatives. So like they pair up. Every time you have a pair, you're going to get a positive result. So that's one little shortcut. Now this one, notice there is no parentheses, so there is just a single minus sign, and what is being repeated is the 2. Again, you could multiply all these 2's together, and 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is going to make a 16, and then I'm just going to bring down the minus sign. Now the same rules apply if you have more than one operation. Like when I look at this, I can count and see that there are a pair of negatives, so I know my answer is going to be positive. All I need to do then is multiply the numbers together. 8 times 6 is 48. That's a negative 48 times a negative 2. A negative times a negative makes a positive, so that'd be positive 96. Alternatively, I can look at it and say, well, there's a pair of negatives, that's positive. 8 times 4 times 2 is 96. Again, here I can do it in steps. A negative times a negative makes a positive, so this would make positive 18. Bring down your 1. 18 times a negative 1, well, a positive times a negative makes a negative, negative 18. Or you could go up here, there's a pair with an odd man out, so the answer's got to be negative, so it'd be negative 18. Here I'll do it in steps. A negative times a negative makes a positive, so it'd be positive 12. I'll copy down the rest. Negative 12 or positive 12 times negative 5 would make a negative 60. Copy down the rest. A negative times a negative makes a positive, so it'd be positive 60. Or I could do it all at once. There's a pair of negatives here, there's a pair of negatives here, so I have 2 equal pairs, so the answer is going to be positive. 3 times 4 times 5 makes 60, and you're done with your answer. Now division follows the same rules. If you have like signs, the answer is going to be positive. If you have unlike signs, the answer is going to be negative. So if you divide a positive by positive, the answer is positive. A negative divided by a negative, the answer is positive. But if you have opposing signs, one negative, one positive, whether it's in the numerator or denominator, you're going to get a negative result. So let's look at some examples. Here it's a positive number divided by a negative number. So I know the answer is going to be negative. And then 42 divided by 7 would create a negative 6. Here, a negative divided by positive creates a negative answer, and just do 80 divided by 10, which makes an 8. Here I have a negative divided by negative, which means I'm going to get a positive answer. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And of course, this will just be written regular 8. 0 divided by negative 7. Well, anytime you divide 0 by any number, whether it be positive or negative, you're going to get 0. And then finally, if you take any number and divide it by 0, that's going to make undefined. Now let's look at an application. Joe Nordstrom lost $400 on each of 7 consecutive days. He lost money, so this would be represented with a negative 400, and he lost it on 7 days in the stock market. Represent his total loss as a product of signed numbers. Well, product of signed numbers would be 7 times negative 400, because for 7 days he lost $400. So he lost a total of negative $2,800. Stop